welcome back to another episode of the Better Contractor. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about attracting and retaining employees. So, if you guys are like us and pretty much every other contractor in the space, this is something everyone has been dealing with. Probably always been an issue, especially since COVID. It seems like it has been an issue during then, especially, and then after, still an issue. So, one of the top things I'm kind of seeing is that, hey, I'm having trouble finding good employees, but I'm also having trouble retaining because the market is so competitive. People are after each other's employees. So um, I've got my trusted sidekick, Travis. Hey, Travis.
Good to see you, Brent.
So we're just going to talk a little bit about kind of what we think it takes to basically build, or what it takes to retain and what it takes to attract those employees. And the labor market is a little different now. And I think you'll agree, Travis, but the labor market is different now than it used to be. The newer generation, and not generally just them, but they're wanting a lot more of the culture. They're wanting more engagement. They don't just want or need a job because jobs are ample. They're everywhere. They're wanting to go somewhere where they feel like they're not just a number, where they feel like, hey, you know what? This is actually a place I enjoy coming to work. They have a culture here that makes me feel welcome, that makes me feel like I'm engaged. There has to be some sort of advancement structure of some kind. Um, there needs to be evaluations. There needs to be core values. I know like with Lantern Corp, one of the things we do, and we didn't do this well in the beginning, but now we do very consistent evaluations where before you pretty much had to come to us and say, hey, I want to raise. And then we're like, okay, well, we need to do an evaluation. That was a few years back. Now we have a system in place with Bamboo HR. And that has allowed us to say, hey, it is time for your 3-month eval, your 6-month eval, whatever evaluation period we have it set for. But what that does is allows us to go in with that employee and say, hey, what are your goals? So we actually do a goal setting vision with them. And then we will go through and also say, hey, here's some constructive feedback that we need to see worked on before your next advancement. But if you're wanting to get to this position, then the other nice thing there is we're actually able to say, hey, in order to get to that position, these are the things that we need to see. So having that evaluation period, but then also we've really set up a set of core values to where we are trying our best to hire by those, to review by those, and to fire by those. What that does though is that's building culture. It's not just setting the tone for, hey, this is how we do business, that is what it's doing, but it's also saying, hey, this is how you are going to advance or potentially cease employment here as a whole. I know, Travis, you've got a military background, and I think the military is one of those places, and I've read some of like Jocko's books and stuff like that, where culture is obviously hugely important. But I was just kind of curious, kind of what your take is on culture and engagement.
I was a Marine, and I'll be honest. I remember from being very young that I wanted to join the military at some point, and then what gravitated towards the Marine Corps was I really didn't know about special operations or like the Green Berets or Navy SEALs. So this was in the 90s. So there wasn't a ton of books and literature and things out there. So my only exposure was really to whatever the marketing and the recruitment videos were. And the Marines had a pretty consistent one. It was we're looking for a few, the few, the proud, the Marines. We're not looking for everybody. If you think you're tough enough, if you want to join the elite, give us a try, and we might take you if you have what it takes. And so I remember that's the thing that attracted me to the Marine Corps is I wanted to be part of something bigger, special, more challenging, kind of test my mental toughness, my physical toughness. What did it say about me as far as test who I am as a person? And that was really the challenge. I didn't know much more beyond that. And I remember that was something that influenced my older brother join the Marine Corps. So he graduated 2 years earlier than I did. And so that always irked me a little bit that he got the chance first. But that was ultimately what led us both to the Marine Corps. And if you look back over the past couple decades, the Marine Corps has been one of those that's consistently hit its recruiting goals and the target. And a lot, and I'm sure there's somebody out there that can look at all the marketing or statistics, or actually knows some of the more intricate details about why it's successful or not. But one of the big contrasts is the way that the other services market. And a lot of the times you'll see the recruitment and how they present themselves is join for college money, or go travel the world, or do things other than make it kind of something other than maybe what the core components are. The other branches have always missed their recruiting. I say always, for a long time, and more consistently missed their recruiting targets. The Marine Corps, I believe, up until today, over the past several decades, has never missed a recruiting target. And I think what kind of that speaks to is it translates over into the civilian sector as well, in that who you present yourself as a company is going to attract those types of people. How you present is your core values. Is your core values aligned? Everybody likes to be on a winning team. Everybody wants to be on the team that just won the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup. Or so, and there's obviously things that drive them to that level of success. But you're going to attract the type of people that you market, and that's when it starts. So in a highly competitive marketplace where you're trying to get the right people in, you're trying to attract the right people, you're trying to hire them and then keep them. It really starts with that, in that who are you presenting yourself as an organization will ultimately determine who applies to your organization. And then once you've attracted them, is that message consistent? So Brent, I know that you talk about the core values of like Lander Corp, that it's more than just something that's thrown up on the wall, and that we see other organizations where they'll spend a lot of time in crafting this beautifully written, very articulate core values, and then it's almost never visited outside of just marketing. And you look at their actions. There's a saying that I love: is your actions speak so loud I can't hear what you're saying. So it's incongruent, the what they actually do versus the core values they have. And so once you have attracted the candidate that you most want and you get them in, everything else has to be consistent too. Do you have standards? Do you have processes that mirror who you presented yourself externally as that type of company? And setting high standards, again, it will attract those who want that structure, who want to win, who know it's not going to be easy, but they also need to know it's going to have a reward on the backside. You can find organizations now that have no problem recruiting younger generation, in the younger staff, and staffing their organizations. And a lot of those conversations, it's been about, one, we started with very specifically targeting holding high standards and then maintaining that. And then part of what you were talking about, Brent, of show them there's a career path, show them clearly how to get to it. The A lot of the younger generations, and across the board too, is there's going to be some people when it's the dynamics versus the traditionalists. The traditionalists, and it's kind of the spectrum as far as those who adapt to change. The traditionalist never wants anything to change at all, in that they want to come in, know exactly what they're doing, and if you introduce variability to it, it just wrecks their world. Versus the other end of the spectrum is the dynamics, where they want change, they want excitement, and something new and fresh all the time. And if you try and give them repetitive work and the same, they go crazy. And then you got the pragmatics that sit in between, and they can modulate based on whatever's coming their way. But there's still a consistent component in there, in that, one, knowing your people and having those regular touch points and feedback sessions with the people. It's two-way: one, giving feedback to them and helping them understand where they're at, especially in aligned with personal goals, professional goals, and making it more of a family type environment, and helping them in both regards, because they will affect each other. But then it's also for them to give you feedback, as a leader or somebody who is running that organization, to get feedback and take some direction, and understand your leadership role and how are you affecting, because it kind of goes both ways, leading up and down the organization. And that ultimately, them knowing where they're at, have a clear career path, have a clear expectation of what are we trying to achieve, we're working together. It doesn't always have to be negative. And if things in the communication channels are open, more often it's not going to be negative, because you're going to be in sync. But putting all of that together, it's being that consistent, along with core values that are solid, that represent what you're wanting to create, and then you mirror that across all touch points of your organization. That creates that culture that you were just talking about, Brent, of people know what they're getting into. You're actually attracting the people that like that culture and want to be a part of that culture. And then you're consistently building that culture. And that's how you retain the top talent that that you just attracted. And that's what we're seeing consistently with organizations that are winning in the talent game, employ various elements of that, but are highly engaging.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in this industry that we're, the better contractors involved with, one of the issues I see a lot of contractors do is hiring out of being desperate. So I will say up front, there's no way you're going to build culture if that is what you're doing. You got to be a lot more intentional about your hiring process. When Travis, when you were talking about like,
You are going to build culture. You're just going to be a
oh
culture
yeah, you
turnover.
just want to build the right one. Yeah, you're going to build a culture you hate. Um, and I know there's going to be times when you first take this initiative to start doing this. If you didn't start with it, there's going to be some employees that you're probably going to terminate or that will leave because, like you said, they don't like that change. They were comfortable with it before; it was easy, and that's actually what they wanted. So, will there be some headaches maybe getting this started? Probably so. Will it be harder to hire for a while? Yes, but I think once you get known as a company that has a standard where people that are in that industry know, hey, this company here, that is what they're known for, and that is where I want to be. Like when you said the Marines, you wanted to go there because you wanted to be a part of something bigger.
And challenging and something that it was excellent. It was I wanted to be something part of something tough and
Yeah,
test who I was as a person. So where other people, 100%. I've had conversations. I have lots of friends across all the branches, and that was not what they were looking for. Like, I have no desire to go get beat up and have a miserable life. For me, that actually attracted me to it. And I know
yeah,
that's similar to the other special operations, whether it's SEALs or Rangers, whatever. They want that and they attract those types of people. So it depends on the organization. So
yeah,
funny, this made me think about, we had a conversation on one of the other podcasts. We're talking about working out and staying healthy. I forget who said it. It might have been you, or maybe it was Tucker, that said it's going to be tough either way. Being fat is going to be tough, and having health problems or discipline and working out is going to be tough. But which one would you rather have? So implement the right procedures, processes, systems, training programs, safety programs, abiding by your is going to be tough. But the other path is tough too. High turnover,
yeah.
lawsuits. I mean, just,
In some ways, it's tougher. Yeah, yeah. So I think building that culture, but then being aware you're going to have to hire that way, and you may need to fire that way. But then going on into like onboarding, so a lot of companies, okay, I think I found this guy or gal that I like. Well, then all of a sudden they just throw them into the workforce. There's no real onboarding, no real training. Maybe they didn't even have a mentor assigned to them inside your corporation. That is a little bit of an issue too, where you're just tossing someone in, hoping they pick up on everything. So I think the onboarding process is important because you're basically setting that tone. You're basically saying, here's what's required to work here. These are our standards. This is what we expect. And some of the better contractor trainings, deal with a little bit of that. Of hey, when you roll up to a job site, this is what is expected at the most basic level. Obviously, you want to take and assign that new employee a mentor so that they can then go through and actually see this more at an advanced level in real life on a real project, not just in a training video or in training. But that's how you're going to build that culture from day one, so you don't have to correct it at the 6 month evaluation or 1 year or whatever. And I was curious, Travis, what from the military standpoint, how was that onboarding process? Like, how did that help set the tone for you guys?
I, I know it needs to have a civilian translation. I mean, it's obviously 100% extremely structured down to the minute almost. Even though what might seem like chaos, it is structured completely to the point where you board once you get into, so everybody west of the Mississippi goes to San Diego, uh, recruit. depot
Mm-hmm.
and training depot. Everybody to the east goes to Paris Island. So I was in Texas, so went to San Diego. They keep you up all night that first one, so you don't even go to sleep. And I mean, it's not happenstance, or they just forgot to check on you, but they're testing you and they're putting you in a mental state where it's just chaos and they're breaking you down. And the entire intent of, especially the first few weeks, is just to break you down so they can remold you. And I mean, that's happening no matter where we're at. For the civilian side, I know that I've seen it very, very structured, and it always makes you feel better. One, kind of the military fog of war is always confusing. Communication breakdown is confusing. It makes people uneasy. And so when you're getting onboarded to organization and there's not a lot of structure, you don't know who you're supposed to talk to, there's not a lot of guidance, you got questions, pay, or what are my responsibilities, who am I supposed to be working with, any of that stuff that's not clear, or they have to ask about, obviously raises red flags. And it it creates confusion, and confusion always leads to potentially horrible outcomes, especially
Yeah.
in an organization. And so the onboarding process, organizations will set the tone for that new hire and the rest of the organization. They can give them a strong, stable foundation where it's clearly articulated who we are, what's expected, set the standards, and then you have to maintain that. It has to be consistent throughout. But if you got some training, or you're safety conscious, or you expect hard work, getting some sort of stable structure, and you can leverage technology, you can leverage platforms and things to help do this, and a lot of organizations are, and there's a lot more out there. But it's so important to have that structure. I mean, question back to you, Brent. I mean, have you seen an organization that did really well and that was really strong, short and long term, that didn't have structure? And
No, especially nowadays.
whether they had it in the beginning or not, but they had to develop it at some point.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say a lot of companies probably don't have enough of it in the beginning. They learn this is something I need to do, and that's when they, fully adopt it. And I know internally with like Landercorp, we're doing it now. We didn't start that way. There was a culture. Don't get me wrong. We weren't hiring and firing by it quick enough, in the very beginning, and it showed a little. Now I think now we've got a lot better culture. We've got an excellent management team, but it took work and it wasn't overnight. You know what I mean? And there's still work to be done, but it's a lot better than it was. And I think when you brought up like the onboarding, but then like setting the tone, the reason we bring up the military is they're one of the best at doing this. I mean, you're literally preparing people to go into war, potentially lose their life. They're at least at minimum away from family and friends for months on end sometimes. So, and it's a family. So they're an awesome example of how to build a culture. There's a company locally that sells internationally that the owner, has been he's super well known for building culture. And it's the same way. It's almost a competition when you get to work there, of trying to actually meet those core values better than others even do. You know, did that happen overnight? Most likely no. But it's that competition even now. Hey, we are going to be that. And then what that does is people start to hold each other accountable, which I think that's amazing. If you can get your culture built to where, let's say, Travis, you and I are on a team together and our culture is so strong, and you see me not doing one of our core values and you're like, hey, Brent, dude, come on. You're letting me down, you're letting the company down. What can I do for you to help this improve? That is powerful too. And I think we've called it Brothers Keeper at Lander Corp. There's mentorship, whatever you wanted to call it, but having someone that you're basically saying on your crew or whatever, saying, hey, I want you to be my accountability partner. So if there's a crew of 6 of us, Travis, and I pick you, like, hey, I want you to hold me accountable, and I'm giving you permission to also hold me accountable. And then going back to those core values. The other thing on core values I wanted to share, and I've said this a lot, where a lot of companies just have core values like on a break room wall or their conference room wall. When we talk about core values, that is not what I'm talking about. Those values can be listed there. They can be listed on your website, but they've got to be something that your team knows and that you actually talk about daily. Because in the absence of not talking about those, people will not remember them. They will not be. something that comes first to mind. It has to be something that is done almost daily. It has to be how decisions are made. So if you roll up to a job site, and let's say one of your core values is always giving the customer 110%, you get ready to leave that job site, you look around and it's 90%, hold each other accountable and say, guys, we got to go clean that trash up. We got to go do this. We got to go do that. Then it's 110%. So it's that constant revisiting of the core value on real life examples and making people, hold to it. Um, it's kind of, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, or the loudest person in the room. Core values are very much that way. If you're not talking about them as leadership, someone else is going to fill that quiet time with something else, whether that's complaining about the company, complaining about you as a leader, complaining about their coworkers. Make the conversation positive and make the conversation about what actually matters, which is the core values.
And I think that so there's another parallel for like the military organization. So the core values almost in some cases can serve as the overall objective in that in the absence of orders, and we'll take it for the lawn care, landscaping, right of way, clear air, the trades, but it really across any organization. Not all the time does the plan work out exactly the way you thought it would. And there are variables that change once you actually get out into the field or you're on the battlefield. And if you have to wait for guidance and directive and it's a micromanagement type environment where you've always got somebody dictate, you're just going to be moving a lot slower, and you're potentially not going to be able to move at the speed of change, which will actually be to the detriment long term. It'll lead to more failures than successes. You don't have a
Yeah.
dynamic work where, as opposed to if everybody down to the lowest level understands what the overall objective is. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is what we're going after. So you take the customer gets 100% all the time. If somebody, the lowest level new hire, was out on the job site and saw something, as long as they have I know that what we're trying to achieve are our mission statement, our core values as an organization. I'm layering that and seeing this job site or what I'm working on through those core values, and something doesn't look right. I think what we probably need to do is something here is going to affect the customer in a negative way. They can always look at the objectives or look at the actions, whatever they're doing through that lens. And even then, if they did something that was incorrect, when it comes back and they're doing an after action debrief at the end of the day with the crew, and it turns out that what they did was incorrect. Uh, they can then come back, and it's a lot more lenient to just say, here's why I did that. I was trying to apply the objective of doing what was right for the customer." They can clearly articulate what they did or why they did what they did, and then it opens that dialogue to help improve them as an individual. But at least you knew where they were coming from, and they could clearly articulate, "This is the objective. I thought it was going to get us closer to it." And they were acting in a manner that was consistent with the company and what they believed was right according to what your organization represented. And so it really, but that comes down to what you're saying. It can't be just something hanging on the wall. If you spent the time and that's really what you're representing, you've got to be communicating that down at all levels back and forth so that they can see through the lens. But it allows them to have decentralized command and leadership. They're leading themselves, they're leading their team, they're leading themselves away from the hierarchy always waiting for guidance, and they can go affect change much faster. And they're going to know more out in the field with hands on than what you could see if you were not co-located with them. So it empowers them to handle whatever's needed when they need to, and take care of issues before it potentially spirals off into a bigger problem because they're waiting for guidance.
Yeah, I like that. Because your core values should be, you don't want them to be so long that you got to actually put a ton of thought into memorizing them, but they should be concise and to the point enough that, like you said, if something happens on a job, that they don't need to call me or another leader at the company for every little answer. Like, they should be able to think through those core values and say, well, this is pretty obvious. This is what we need to do as a crew on this job site. Or maybe that's the wrong answer, but then I should be able to, as a leader, look back and like, hey, you did the right thing. Maybe we lost a little bit of money. That's a different issue altogether. We'll work on that. But the core values, you met those. So the crew would still get a pat on the back for that. So I think that's key.
Just like the Jocko, so Jocko, they wrote "Discipline Equals Freedom," which was the first one about taking leadership to the lowest level and at all levels and back and forth. But they quickly, after that book was released, had to release a second book, kind of a partner to it, called "The Dichotomy of Leadership," because it can be taken too far, where you're so detached that you, as a leader, don't even know what's going on, and taking too much ownership where maybe you're not addressing the problem. So there's a balance to that too. Of you definitely want to empower with the objectives, the beliefs, the core beliefs, and the core values down to the lowest level, and they're taking ownership. But there's also a break point and a balance too that doesn't, for the leader, if you're leading multiple crews and you're not on site with all of them, you still need to be checking in and know what's going on, and they need to be comfortable with coming to you, and your organization will understand, based on your own individual culture and the way you run your operations, where those break points are. But there's a balance. But most people over index on one and don't push and empower to the lowest level enough.
Yeah. No, I like that. And yeah, one thing that comes to mind a little bit too is as a leader, and this should be all of your management team for sure, but especially the main leader, whether that's CEO or president or whatever, you have to absolutely live these core values out. Like you cannot be one who has these, enforce it, encourage it, but then when they watch you, they're like, man, you don't do 1, 3, and 5 at all. So the only way you can build leadership and culture really is from the top. You're setting the standard, you're setting the tone, and then you're encouraging that every single day. One thing we kind of kicked off the podcast with, which is another element of this, is evaluations. I don't want to reiterate too much of that, but I just want to kind of keep things in a little bit of an order. So you've built culture, you've implemented that. It took you a few years or whatever. You've established yourself in your industry as this is who Landacor, this is whatever organization you are. This is who we are and what we stand for, and this is our standard. This is how we operate. Then you're doing the onboarding, you're doing all that stuff to kind of really set those standards, for the new hire. But evaluations is an important part of that too, because typically, if you have those high core values and high standards, you're probably bringing forth a little bit more of a driven individual, which means that driven individual wants to probably know there's some advancement opportunities within your organization. Those evaluation periods are a good thing. I recommend every 3 months, 6 months max. That way, there's a long enough period of time where you can say, hey, you're killing it on these 8 items, like nailing it. Core values, you exhibit those. There's these 2 areas where we could see a little bit of improvement. So you're giving that employee the positive feedback. You're reminding them the core values matter. If there's one they're not doing well enough, then you give them constructive feedback on that one. But then you're also doing a goal setting. So where do you want to be? What does your life look like in 1 year, 3 years, 10 years? And then how does that fit within this organization? So you're goal setting with them, and then letting them know, hey, to get there, this is what you'll need to do over the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. You'll need this training. You'll need to go to this kind of a job site and get some experience there. If they want to do bidding and estimating, well, that's not something you just like shove somebody into. So then you got to build in, hey, these little small jobs, we'll have you do those. We'll see how you do. We'll give feedback and advance from there. But that's an important part of this as well, because those driven individuals have to know, hey, I have a future here. But then you as the leader, and you can't lie about this, but you have to have a vision that's big enough for your company that Travis's, Brent's, everyone else's visions can fit inside of that one vision. Because if I go out and I'm setting this tiny little vision, like, hey, we're going to grow 2% per year. Well, as a driven individual, I'm thinking, okay, well, it's time to go elsewhere, because the top is pretty close to where I'm already at. So you've got to set a big enough vision as, hey, you like that position, we're going to grow fast enough, we're going to get more of those positions available. So, but again, you can't lie about that. You actually have to be able to deliver that and execute on it. But that evaluation period, I think way too many companies don't put quite enough effort, because a lot of companies don't like to give raises, and that's what evaluations are typically viewed as, is an opportunity to get a raise. But once you've got that culture and you've got those employees, then you need to keep those employees in that evaluation process. is allowing that growth to happen from a pay perspective. But it's an awesome opportunity to say, hey, you are awesome at these things. I do need to see some feedback and or some constructive criticism, and then give them feedback on that later, like in a month, maybe after, where, hey, I'm seeing you've made some improvements. That's awesome. So I think taking your organization and thinking through those different steps, but then also knowing, guys, this is not going to be, I'm going to implement this tomorrow, and by 3 months from now, we're rocking and rolling. We're the most culture driven, high energy organization in the world. It will take time. And it'll take you time to find those employees and probably remove some that don't meet that, which will be tough conversations and tough things for you to do as an owner or leader. But it will be required at some point. So you're going to have some previous employees, if you're implementing this after the fact, which a lot of people do. You're going to have some employees that don't meet it. Maybe they were great at whatever, but they do not meet this. And if you do not get rid of them or repair that, you will have a very, very hard time developing that culture, because they will develop a counterculture to yours. So,
The feedback piece, I know this is such a delicate balance because so even the 3 months, that's better than what a lot of people do. And there's maybe different perspectives too, in that if you're doing, and some organizations do this, some don't, but if you're doing at the end of the day after action type reports for the military, or debriefs, if you will, but it's the getting the crew back together, recapping, hey, this is what went on for the day, this is what's coming up tomorrow, taking those opportunities, that's almost micro feedback sessions to, in that it. So I love the analogies of a ship or an aircraft. If it's off 1 degree off target when it starts from its endpoint, by the time you get a few hours into its journey, you're off by a lot. And so the longer you drag those feedback sessions out, they can be off course significantly. If that's the only time is 6 months, and I even think 3 months is probably too long, but it depends on what other checks and balances you have in your organization. If your individual team leaders, crew leaders out there in the field are not just task focused on the job, that's obviously part of their job, but they're also wearing the leadership hat. And at the end of the day, they're having those conversations. They're plugged into their teams. They are working together. They'll have that ongoing day to day feedback and be able to give and receive feedback from those individual team members. They just have to be deliberately wearing that hat from the leadership standpoint of, I'm building this relationship. I'm building them as a person. I'm building them as a part of their career and their objectives, which that also requires some foundational things that they have to have in place. If I'm working towards this structured bonus plan or career progression plan with them, so now on the day-to-day basis, I'm kind of micro evaluating, giving feedback, and doing micro adjustments. And then there's the documentation piece too. I know it's probably the least favorite of any organization to go document, but it's important to document that stuff. So I was a part of an organization where it was weekly. You did weekly one-on-ones with your team, and the larger that team got, especially when they weren't co-located with you, it was really tough as a leader. And a lot of times those would get postponed or moved, and you do what you have to. That's maybe too much, just because what happens is you put that expectation. It's almost a full-time job, just and if they've got dual responsibility, if they're supposed to be doing individual performance and tasks out on site and things, and then they've got the manager hat where they got all these managerial and documentation. There's probably a balance in there, but having that constant feedback and be able, because things get lost on a day-to-day basis. If you're not revisiting this for 2 weeks, there's little wins or things that person or those people on your team did that, like, that was amazing, I want to reinforce that behavior, or that's definitely on track, and I actually want to document that and replicate that thought process or whatever in the rest of the team. That gets lost if you're not, if you're just bam bam bam, job focused, and then when it comes down to 2 weeks or 3 months, you've completely lost all of that. Or if there was something, hey, I noticed they're off on this, and maybe they're not doing something incorrectly, maybe I addressed it on the spot, but I never revisit it, didn't document it, have no. There might be a trend that might be an indicator that, hey, maybe we're not talking about this at the beginning. Maybe there's a safety training thing or a equipment orientation thing that we're missing on this, because it maybe popped up over here. And two, you can see trends and patterns across groups or teams. Maybe it's two crew leaders working in different parts of the country and they're having the same challenges, whether it's behavioral, leadership, or technical, where it's safety or equipment operation. And it was minor at the time, so it never really got addressed. But maybe there's a pattern there that's indicative of higher things that aren't happening or things that can be adjusted that you would never even know is happening unless you did document, unless you did have those
Yeah.
structured things. Um,
When I think each individual project, if you can have KPIs, like I love KPIs. So if you can have your individual projects where you're reviewing those KPIs, maybe that's something you're doing on a little bit more frequent basis, because
and AI is going to be able to help us with this stuff if we can document it. There's programs that can go look for trends and patterns and pull some
yeah,
data and things. So there's tools
yeah.
out there too. I couldn't inject technology or innovation.
I knew
I
you had
could
to do it. I
not do.
knew you had to do it. But no, I mean, like even Atlantic Corp, like I think we have a strong core value and awesome culture. And I look at, for the most part, I'm dealing with our management team on a daily basis, so that's my interaction throughout the day. And like the one we have now, like I would put them up against any of our competition. I actually would take them over most so we deal in oil and gas. I would take my management team over most of our customers' management team just because of how good they are, the follow through, the engagement, the passion, how they meet those core values. Like they're actually people that they don't just fit a role need. Like I actually like them as people. I would hang out with them outside of work happily. That matters so much. And I look at the group we have now versus several years ago. And this is not dissing those. It just didn't have that core value fit yet. Now that it does, job is so much nicer, so much better. I always enjoy going to work, but now like I actually enjoy the people I work with. Again, could hang out with them on a Saturday or Sunday after work. But that's that culture. You brought up like trends and stuff like that. So safety is one of our big things because we work in oil and gas, and part of our culture, what we do is dangerous. So safety is a big deal to us. We want everybody to go home same condition they came to work in. So in safety, there's this thing called near misses. So meaning that something almost happened, but it didn't quite happen. And then there's BBS, behavior based safety. There's all these different tools where we are trying to find a pattern before it actually becomes an incident. And the value of that data is like you just said. If we can identify that pattern, identify a trend before it becomes something major, and then prevent it and put tools in place to prevent it, that's the goal of it. And I think, to kind of give like a real world example to what you're talking about in this industry, that's one of the easy ones. Like there's so much data there, but you got to collect it.
Hmm.
It doesn't just come in. For the most part, most people, if they have a near miss and you don't want that information, request that information, or have some kind of reward system for turning it in, probably going to look the other way and be like, well, that was a close call, but I'm fine. One day that may not be a close call for you, or because you didn't submit something or turn something in, and that's where we go brother's keeper. If you didn't turn something in, and now 2 years later that wasn't ever repaired or fixed, now all of a sudden your coworker actually got hurt or died or whatever. So it kind of brings that personal element to it. But kind of start to wrap this up a little bit, Travis. Is there any kind of closing thoughts, final thoughts you have?
No, I mean the topic is super important, but
Yeah,
the underlying component is structure, developing a deliberate and consistent structure, whatever that might be for you. But and then layer this on top of it of I know we started out with talent acquisition, retention, but it ties into culture uh, specifically in that drives all of it. But
yeah,
being very deliberate in structuring what you want early on, and then you can build upon it and adjust it and tweak it. But the sooner you can get that structure in, the more stable the foundation. And you're going to put it in if you're going to survive as an organization. You're going to put it in at some point. So, hey,
Yeah.
put
Oh
it in
yeah.
early, and you can always tweak it as you grow because you probably are going to have to as you grow.
Yeah. No, I like that. And we spent most of our time kind of talking about retaining, I feel like. In a nutshell, though, attracting, once you have built this culture, this system, and you have all this in place, one of the most powerful ways to attract is by word of mouth. Once you have that stuff in place, and hopefully you're also doing some kind of PR or marketing to get that out there, and then all of a sudden, worker A that's working for your competitor, this one over here at this other competitor, all of a sudden they realize, hey, this company here, there's something different, and I don't feel that where I work.
Mm.
That is the most powerful attracting method for a new employee out there, is that where when they think, hey, I'm frustrated with my current job, my current employer, whatever, and it feels like when I look at this company here, it's different. They don't have that issue. That's where I'm going to go. So that's what you want from the attraction standpoint. Market a little bit, but don't lie. Market, make sure everything's accurate, but highlight your wins and highlight that culture a little bit. And that's how your, other employee or potential future employees are going to say, hey, there's something here.
Strong company culture, clear core values, articulate that at every point, and make that consistent across every aspect of your company, and join the
Yeah.
Marines.
There you go. That's the perfect wrap up. That's the perfect wrap up right there. I
Those
only
are the
have to
core
do it now.
components.
But in all seriousness, no, guys, for you guys and gals listening, it's not easy, but it is going to be so worth it if you're wanting to grow your company and have a strong company that can make it for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, and on. You've got to do this. So put forth the effort. Like we talked about earlier, there's always two ways to do something, and it's going to be hard. This is hard. The alternative to me is actually harder. I would pick this hard over the other one. So, guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others. If you didn't, tune on out. We'll catch you guys next time. Thank you.